My name is Michael. I'm 46 years old, a mechanic from western Pennsylvania. The years have written themselves into my hands. Small burns from engines, a long scar across my palm from a slipping wrench, and a faint, permanent smell of oil that no soap can wash away. For most of my life, that was enough. The garage, the noise, the rhythm of labor. I understood machines. You take them apart, clean them, rebuild them, and they work again. People aren't like that. I learned that too late. Everything changed when I met Karen. She came in on a wet Thursday morning, the kind where rain makes the world smell like metal and dirt. Her car needed a new alternator. She looked tired, but not from lack of sleep, the kind of tired that sits deep in the bones, like she'd been carrying something too heavy for too long. While I worked on her car, she waited, arms folded, looking at the floor more than at me. When I told her it was fixed, she smiled just enough to make me want to see that smile again. A week later, she came back. This time it wasn't the car. She just brought coffee. Said she was passing by. That was how it started. Small, unimportant gestures that later turn into the center of your life. Karen had 3 children. Olivia was 17, all edge and distance, the kind of girl who had already decided she knew every truth the world had to offer. Sophie was 15, quieter, but sharp in her own way, always watching, always judging. And Ethan, the youngest, 11 then, still soft around the edges, still capable of believing the best in people. Their father, Paul, lived 3 states away. I never met him, but I met his absence. It lived in every corner of that house. His name came up in stories, in arguments, in photos that still sat on the mantel. He was the ghost I could never compete with. Even after years of being gone, he was still the measure against which everything was compared. When Karen and I began seeing each other seriously, I told myself I wouldn't try to replace him. I didn't want to steal their father from them. I just wanted to add something: steadiness, safety, a presence that didn't fade when things got hard. After we married, I bought an old house on the edge of town. It had good bones but was falling apart. Cracked walls, leaking pipes, floors that creaked like they were whispering old complaints. I rebuilt it with my own hands. Every nail, every board, every coat of paint was a declaration: we are starting over. Each child got their own space. Olivia's room was painted the exact shade of blue she wanted. We went through 6 paint samples before she nodded. Sophie's room had bookshelves I built myself, one for her novels, one for her drawings. Ethan's had a basketball hoop bolted to the side of the garage and a patch of asphalt I poured myself so he'd have somewhere to play. Those things cost time, money, and sleep, but I didn't care. The act of building gave me hope. Every paycheck went to something for them: new clothes, new gadgets, piano lessons, summer camps. I told myself love wasn't in words but in proof. If I worked harder, gave more, stayed patient long enough, they'd see it. They'd feel it. For a while, I believed it was working. There were moments, small ones, but they mattered. Olivia once asked for my opinion on her college essay. Sophie gave me a birthday card she drew herself. Ethan hugged me in public, called me Mike instead of Michael, the way kids do when they've let their guard down. Those moments felt like sunlight after years of winter. Karen, too, began to soften. I'd find her asleep on the couch after work, the kids upstairs, the TV humming low. She looked peaceful in those moments. Not happy, exactly, but safe. That word became everything to me. I wanted to be the reason she didn't have to worry anymore. At the garage, the guys joked that I'd gone domestic. I didn't mind. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just fixing cars, I was fixing something human. There were nights when the house felt alive. Laughter, music, the smell of dinner drifting through the hall. I'd stand in the doorway, watching them without saying a word. It was like seeing a machine I'd built come to life, every part moving in harmony. I thought, this is it. This is what it means to belong. But even then, there were cracks. Small things that I ignored. Sometimes Olivia would mention her dad in a way that made the air colder. Dad used to take us camping, she'd say, glancing at me as if testing something. Or Sophie would tell a story that ended with, Dad never made us do chores. It wasn't cruelty, not yet, but it was the kind of reminder that keeps you in your place. Karen never corrected them. She'd just smile, half apologetic, and change the subject. Still, I held on. Hope makes fools of men like me. It whispers that love can be earned if you just give enough of yourself away. When Ethan started playing basketball for the school team, I became his biggest fan. I built a small bleacher out of scrap wood so Karen and I could sit together during games. I cheered until my voice gave out. Once, after he scored a winning *T, he ran to me first. Not to Karen, not to his sisters. And for that one fleeting second, I thought I'd finally crossed whatever invisible line divided me from them. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that moment. The joy, the pride, the sense that maybe, finally, I wasn't an outsider. I told Karen how I felt. She smiled, tired but genuine, and said, "They're getting used to you. It just takes time." I wanted to believe that. So I kept building. Physically and emotionally. I replaced the roof that winter, fixed the fence in spring, planted a small garden in the backyard because Sophie liked flowers. I paid off debts that weren't mine, helped Olivia buy her first car, put money aside for Ethan's college fund. Each act felt like another brick in the foundation of something permanent. Sometimes, late at night when everyone else was asleep, I'd walk through the quiet house and listen, the ticking of the water heater, the hum of the fridge, the faint sound of someone turning in their bed. Those were my symphonies. Proof that everything was functioning, held together, alive. I remember one evening vividly. We were all sitting at the dinner table. Karen had made lasagna. Olivia was talking about her senior trip, Sophie was sketching something on a napkin, Ethan was telling a story about school. The light hit their faces just right, warm, soft, ordinary. I looked around and thought, this is what peace looks like. I should have known peace doesn't last. But that night, I believed in it completely. I believed that all the effort, all the work, was building something unbreakable. When I kissed Karen goodnight, she said, "You're good to us, Michael. You really are." It wasn't love, not the way I wanted it, but it was enough to keep me going. Back then, I still believed that if you pour enough of yourself into a family, eventually they'll pour something back. That giving creates gravity. That devotion guarantees belonging. I didn't understand yet that sometimes the more you give, the more invisible you become. That realization would come later, sharp and slow, like rust spreading under paint. But for that brief stretch of years, I lived inside the illusion that effort equals love, that labor equals loyalty, and that a man can build himself into a family the way he builds a house, with patience, sweat, and faith. I was wrong. But I didn't know it yet. It didn't happen suddenly. It never does. Families don't break in explosions, they dissolve, slow and silent, like rust eating through metal. The first sign was small. Olivia stopped saying thank you. It wasn't deliberate at first, just small omissions. A gift handed across the table met with silence. A ride to school taken for granted. I told myself she was growing up, that teenagers forget their manners. But gratitude, once gone, never returns. It's not a phase. It's a choice. Sophie followed in her sister's footsteps, though in quieter ways. She started rolling her eyes when I spoke, laughing at things I said under her breath. I'd walk into a room and feel conversations stop, like a teacher entering a class that had been laughing too loud. They weren't cruel, not openly, just indifferent. That's worse. Cruelty at least acknowledges your existence. Indifference erases it. Ethan changed last. He used to meet me at the door when I came home from work, covered in grease and exhaustion. "Hey, Mike!" He'd shout like it meant something. But one day, without warning, it became, "Hey, Michael." Then just, "Hey." And one day, nothing at all. Karen noticed, but she didn't speak about it. Her silence grew heavier than any insult. She moved through the house like someone walking carefully across thin ice. Every time I tried to talk about it, she'd sigh, that tired, practiced sigh that meant the subject was closed before it began. "They're kids," she'd say. They'll come around. But kids don't come around. They just learn how to ignore you better. The house I built started to feel like someone else's home. The laughter that once filled it became distant, private, meant for someone else's ears. I'd walk into the living room, and they'd scatter, to their rooms, to their phones, to anywhere I wasn't. Still, I kept providing. That's what men like me do. We work. We pay. We endure. Love, we tell ourselves, will grow from stability, from patience, from showing up every day. But love doesn't grow in silence. It withers there. I remember the wedding day, ours. I thought marriage might be the final seal, the proof that we'd become one unit. The ceremony was small. I stood in front of those kids, vowing not just to love their mother, but to be there for them too. They smiled politely, like guests at a stranger's party. At the reception, I overheard Olivia talking to one of her friends. "Yeah," she said, laughing softly. "Mom's husband seems nice enough. At least he pays for things." Her friend giggled. My name wasn't mentioned again. That sentence stayed with me longer than the vows. After the wedding, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Karen's phone lighting up with messages from her ex. About the kids, she always said. The way she'd defend him when I questioned why he never contributed financially. "He's trying," she'd insist. "He's just not as stable as you." I was stable. That was my role. Stability. Dependability. Predictability. Words that sound like virtues until you realize they mean boring, replaceable, safe. The months passed. I paid for Olivia's car, Sophie's tutoring, Ethan's summer camp. I bought groceries, fixed the plumbing, replaced the broken washer. Every dollar I earned became a vote of loyalty to a family that never voted me back in. And yet, I stayed. Because leaving felt like failure. Because men like me measure our worth in endurance. But endurance has a price. One evening, I came home late. The house was quiet except for laughter from the dining room. Karen and the kids were sitting at the table, plates already cleared, dessert half-eaten. No one had waited for me. I stood in the doorway, watching them. Karen glanced up, startled. "Oh, I didn't realize the time," she said. "We thought you were working late." I was. For them. Always for them. I sat down, trying to join in, but the air was wrong, like walking into a conversation that had already decided your absence. Ethan's eyes stayed on his phone. Olivia talked about a new jacket her dad had sent from across the country. Sophie laughed, saying he still knew her taste. Karen smiled. No one mentioned that I was the one who paid the credit card bill that bought the gift in the first place. That night, I lay awake next to Karen. She scrolled through her phone in the dark, the blue light painting her face cold. "Do you ever feel like I'm just background?" I asked. She turned off the phone. "Don't start this again. I'm serious. Sometimes I think I'm the only one trying." "They appreciate you," she said, already rolling away. Her voice had no conviction. "Appreciation without respect is pity." I didn't want pity. I wanted presence. Weeks turned into months. The kids' contempt evolved, no longer subtle, now sharpened. When I reminded Ethan to do his homework, he said, "You're not my dad." Not with anger, with casual truth, like he was correcting a mistake. Olivia began calling me Michael in front of guests. Never stepdad, never dad. Just a name. Detached. Sophie once told a friend on speakerphone that her mom's husband was a control freak. I was fixing a shelf in the next room. She didn't bother to lower her voice. When I confronted her later, she said, "It's not a big deal. Everyone knows you're just strict." Strict. That's what they called it when I asked for basic respect. The real father, Paul, started calling more often. He'd video chat during dinner sometimes. The kids lit up when his face appeared on the screen, their voices bright, their laughter loud. I'd excuse myself quietly, carrying my plate to the sink. After each call, Karen's mood softened. She'd sit there, smiling faintly, scrolling through old photos of him and the kids. Once, I caught her looking at one where they were all dressed up for some trip, Paul's arm around her shoulders. She didn't notice me watching. I asked her once why she kept those pictures up. She said, "They're memories for the kids." But memories need permission to live. I began to see it clearly. I wasn't the man of the house. I was the stand-in, the financier, the silent guarantor of everyone else's comfort. When Olivia graduated high school, I paid for the entire ceremony, decorations, catering, photos. Paul didn't come. He sent flowers. His name was on the card. She held those flowers through every picture. That night, I asked her if she'd at least call to thank me. She said she would. She never did. The shift was complete by then. I had stopped being someone they ignored out of youth. Now I was the necessary inconvenience that funded their lives. The invisible engine that kept running no matter how many times they kicked it. Karen's silence became my punishment. Whenever I tried to talk about it, she'd say, "You're overthinking." Or worse, "Don't make it about you." But how could it not be? Every dollar, every hour, every ounce of effort, all of it had come from me. The final sign came one night at dinner. We were eating in near silence. Olivia complained that her father hadn't sent enough money for her college textbooks. Sophie rolled her eyes and said, "He tries his best." Ethan muttered, "At least he doesn't nag all the time." Karen didn't say a word. I put down my fork. "You all know who actually pays for this table you're sitting at, right?" No one answered. Olivia finally looked up. "We didn't ask you to." It was said lightly, offhand, like a joke. But it wasn't a joke. It was the truth. That night, something inside me shifted. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just stared at my reflection in the window and realized that I had been building a family that didn't exist. I thought I'd built a home. What I'd really built was a cage, one I entered willingly, hammer in hand, mistaking servitude for love. And once you see the bars, you can't unsee them. The next morning, I left early for work. The house was still, the light gray and cold. As I stepped outside, I looked back at the structure I had repaired, painted, and paid for. It stood proud, beautiful, and empty, like a monument to misplaced devotion. I didn't know it yet, but the next time I rebuilt anything, it would be my own life. The breaking point wasn't loud. It didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It arrived like winter frost, silent, creeping, absolute. You wake up one morning and realize the warmth is gone, and it's not coming back. It started with Olivia's engagement. She was 24, radiant in that careless, youthful way that confuses confidence with certainty. When she told us she was getting married, Karen cried, Sophie screamed, Ethan clapped her on the back like a proud brother. I smiled too, because that's what I'd trained myself to do. Smile through every bruise you can't show. She said the wedding would be small, simple, but her eyes were already imagining grandeur. Dresses, photographers, caterers, the works. I didn't hesitate. "I'll take care of it," I said. It was reflex like breathing. I'd been taking care of everything for so long that the offer came out before my brain even caught up. Olivia smiled, but it wasn't the smile of gratitude. It was expectation fulfilled. The months that followed were a blur of receipts. Venues, florists, hair trials, cake tastings. Karen handled the planning, but my name signed every check. I kept telling myself it was worth it, that maybe this would be the moment where everything changed. That standing in that church, watching her walk down the aisle, I'd finally feel like part of something sacred. But hope is a Dr*G, and I'd been overdosing for years. One afternoon, I came home early from work. The house was full of voices, Olivia's friends, laughter, music. They were in the living room, surrounded by magazines and wine glasses. I paused at the doorway, listening. "He's paying for everything," Olivia said, her tone casual, almost proud. Someone laughed. "You're lucky." My dad told me to handle it myself. Olivia shrugged. He's not my real dad. But he feels guilty if he's not useful. The laughter that followed was soft, but it burned through me like acid. I turned and walked out before anyone saw me. I sat in my truck for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel, trying to remember how to breathe. That night, I didn't mention it. I ate dinner in silence. Karen talked about flower arrangements. Sophie scrolled through her phone. I nodded when appropriate, smiled when expected. But inside, I was somewhere else entirely, standing at the edge of a cliff I'd been building myself, brick by brick. 2 weeks later, the bills came due. The total crossed $350,000. 8 years of raising someone else's children, of paying for lives that were never mine. The wedding alone had swallowed nearly $50,000. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with a calculator, a cup of cold coffee, and a kind of stillness that felt holy. When the numbers settled, so did the truth. I had been buying love at a price no man can afford. The next morning, I made the calls. One by one. I called the venue first. I told them there had been a change of plans. Then the caterer, the florist, the dress shop, the photographer. I was polite, calm, almost cheerful. I didn't explain myself. I just said the funding was no longer available. By the time I hung up the last call, I felt something I hadn't in years: control. Karen found me at the table, paperwork spread like an autopsy. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice already sharp. "I'm canceling the wedding," I said. Her eyes widened. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious. Michael, this is Olivia's day." "No," I said quietly. "It was supposed to be our family's day. But I realized I don't have a family. I have a list of dependents." She stared at me, trying to understand. "You can't just pull out like this. We've already—" "I can," I interrupted. "Because none of you think I'm part of this anyway." Her voice cracked. "You're overreacting." "Am I? Do you even know what she said about me?" Karen frowned. "What are you talking about?" "She told her friends I'm not her real dad. That I only pay because I feel guilty. And maybe she's right. Maybe I've been trying to buy what I should have known was never for sale." Karen's lips parted, but no sound came. That silence, that same silence she'd used for years, sealed everything. "From now on," I said, "Paul can pay for his daughter's wedding. He's her real father, remember?" Her face went pale. "He doesn't have that kind of money." "Then she'll get the kind of wedding he can afford." I stood, walked past her, and went upstairs. For once, I didn't feel anger. Just an emptiness that felt almost clean. 2 weeks later, Olivia called. Her voice was brittle with controlled panic. "Mom said you canceled everything." "That's right," I said. "You can't do that." "I already did. Do you know how humiliating this is? We've already sent invitations." "Then you'd better send another one explaining who's footing the bill now." There was a pause, a small breath of disbelief. "You're punishing me." "No," I said. "I'm freeing myself." She hung up on me. A week later, word came that Paul had stepped in. He promised to handle it. But money can't conjure miracles from debt. The grand reception turned into a rented church basement. The flowers were fake. The photographer was a friend of a friend. On the day of the wedding, I wasn't invited. Karen went without me. She didn't even argue. I stayed home. The house was too quiet, too bright. I poured a drink, sat in the silence, and thought about how many years I'd wasted believing that providing equals belonging. That evening, Ethan came by. He didn't say much, just stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. "It's weird without you there," he said. "Yeah," I answered. "It's been weird for me for a long time." He hesitated. "You really canceled everything?" "I did." He nodded slowly, like he understood something he'd never dared to name. "Good. After he left, I walked through the house. Every wall, every beam, every inch of that place carried my fingerprints. I had rebuilt it from rot, turned it into a home. Now it felt like a mausoleum for all my good intentions. I realized then that love, without respect, isn't love at all. It's servitude wrapped in hope. And I was done serving. That night, I packed a bag. Just a few clothes, my tools, some papers. I didn't tell Karen. I didn't owe her that. I left the house key on the counter next to a note that said only, "Take care of what's yours." The drive to my workshop felt strange, the road too quiet, the air too open. I found an old apartment above the garage. One room, a small kitchen, a bed that creaked when you breathed too hard. It was enough. The first morning I woke there, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Not happiness, not yet, but peace. The kind that comes when a man finally stops trying to fix what was never his to fix. Days turned into weeks. Olivia's wedding came and went without me. Karen didn't call. Neither did the others. Sophie's lessons ended when the bills came due. Ethan's college plans began to crumble without my money propping them up. Paul vanished again, the way he always did, leaving behind the same excuses that once charmed them all. For the first time, they had to face life without me holding it steady. Sometimes at night, I'd sit on the small balcony outside the apartment and look toward the town, toward the house I built. I'd wonder if the lights were still on, if the laughter had returned. But I never drove by. Some things aren't worth revisiting. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad either. I was empty in a way that felt honest. In the end, I hadn't lost a family. I just stopped paying rent on an illusion. The first morning in the apartment felt unreal, like waking up in someone else's dream. The air smelled of metal and dust. Light came in through the narrow window above the garage, slicing the room into gold and shadow. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, just breathing, listening to the quiet hum of the world outside. No voices, no demands, no footsteps waiting for me to fill the silence with money. For the first time in years, I belonged entirely to myself. The shop downstairs was already open. I could hear the compressor hiss, the clang of tools, the slow rhythm of labor. I understood better than I ever understood people. I made coffee, black and bitter, and carried it to the window. Outside, the parking lot gleamed with oil stains and morning sun. Ordinary, imperfect, real. I'd spent a decade chasing something that didn't exist, family as redemption, love as transaction. But standing there, mug in hand, I felt something truer than hope, relief. That evening, I called Ethan. He was the only one I couldn't leave without a word. When he answered, his voice sounded older, rougher. "Hey, Dad," he said, then paused, correcting himself. "Michael." I let it slide. "I heard about the wedding," he continued. "Mom said it was different." "Yeah," I said. "Different's one word for it." He hesitated. "You really left?" I did. There was a silence between us. Not the cold kind we used to have, but the kind that sits heavy with understanding. "I get it," he said finally. "I think they do too." "No," I said. "They don't. But they will." After we hung up, I sat at the small table by the window, staring at the ring mark my coffee mug had left on the wood. That stain, imperfect, unplanned, looked more honest than anything I'd built in that house. Weeks passed. Work filled the days. I fixed engines, changed tires, replaced belts. Every car that came through my hands reminded me of something I used to believe, that what's broken can always be repaired if you're patient enough. But people aren't machines. They break in ways that can't be measured or replaced. Karen called once, weeks later. I almost didn't answer. When I did, her voice came through thin and trembling. "Michael," she said softly, "I don't understand how we got here." "Yes, you do," I replied. "You just never wanted to say it out loud." She started to cry. I let her. "The kids miss you," she said after a while. "Do they?" Silence. Then, "Ethan does." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. Take care of him. He's the only one who still knows what love looks like. Can't we fix this? She asked. Start over. No, I said gently. You can't rebuild a house on the same rotten foundation. It just collapses slower the second time. She didn't answer. I could hear her breathing, slow, uneven, and then the soft click of the line disconnecting. That was the last time we spoke. A few months later, I saw Ethan at the shop. He came in driving an old truck, one I recognized instantly. It used to be mine. Runs rough, I said, wiping my hands on a rag. I know, he replied, smiling faintly. Thought you could help. We worked side by side in the heat, just like we used to. No words for a while, just the sound of metal and effort. Finally, he said, Mom's been quiet. Olivia moved back home. Sophie's working double shifts. Paul's gone again. I nodded. Some people only show up to remind you why you stopped waiting. He looked at me carefully. You miss them. I miss who I thought they were, I said. He didn't reply. When we finished, the engine purred like something reborn. Ethan grinned. You still got it. Never lost it, I said. Before he left, he reached into his pocket and handed me a photo, the one from Olivia's wedding. I hadn't asked for it. In it, they were all there. The bride, the groom, Karen, Sophie, even Paul in the background, smiling that lazy hollow smile of a man who's never paid for anything but still takes the credit. You should keep it, Ethan said. I looked at the picture for a long time. They looked happy, but not real. Like actors caught mid-scene. I folded the photo in half and handed it back. No, I said quietly. That belongs to them. He nodded, pocketed it, and drove away. The sound of the engine faded until all that was left was the soft rattle of the shop fan and the hum of peace returning. That night, I walked through the garage after closing, running my hands along the cool metal of the cars, the smell of grease and steel clinging to me like memory. Every mark on my hands had a story. Engines rebuilt, bolts tightened, lives made functional again. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to fix people who never wanted to work right, who mistook effort for control and kindness for weakness. Freedom, I realized, isn't the absence of responsibility. It's the end of begging for gratitude. I still send Ethan a check sometimes, nothing large, enough to keep him steady. But I never send it to Karen's house. I mail it directly to him. I don't sign Dad. Just Michael. A few months after that, I heard through a mutual friend that Olivia's marriage was already cracking. Sophie dropped out of school for a while. Karen tried to sell the house, but the market was bad, and the repairs I'd done had started to show their age. Paint peeling, the roof sagging. The house was tired, the way people become tired when they lose what held them up. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel pity either. Just clarity. Sometimes, late at night, I'd drive out past the edge of town and park on the old road that ran near that house. I never stopped in front of it. I'd keep my headlights dim, watching from a distance. Once, I saw the porch light flicker on, the shape of someone standing in the doorway. Maybe Karen, maybe Ethan. The rest of them were shadows behind the glass. I didn't wave. I just sat there until the light went out again. In that darkness, I understood what liberation really is. It's not escape. It's acceptance. The kind that lets you breathe without permission. Now, years later, the apartment above the garage feels like enough. The walls are bare, but they don't need pictures to prove I exist. The air smells like oil and solitude, both of which I've learned to love. Some nights I fall asleep with the window open, the sound of the highway in the distance, the hum of tires like a lullaby for men who finally stopped pretending. I think about the word father sometimes. How heavy it is, how easily it's used, how rarely it's earned. I used to believe fatherhood was built from sacrifice. That if you gave enough, time, money, patience, you'd eventually be called by the title you worked for. But now I know better. Fatherhood isn't what you give. It's what's recognized in return. and recognition was something they never gave me. But I did learn something. Something simple. Respect cannot be bought. Love cannot be demanded. And loyalty cannot survive in a house built on silence. I'm not angry anymore. Anger fades when truth settles in. What remains is understanding, the quiet kind that doesn't ask for forgiveness or apology. I look at my hands sometimes, the same hands that built their rooms, their futures, their comfort. I used to hate the scars. Now they're proof that I tried. Proof that I worked for something that refused to hold. If there's a lesson in all of it, it's this. A man can give everything he has and still be treated like a stranger. But the moment he walks away, the world finally learns what he was worth. So I ask you, whoever you are, reading this, hearing it, feeling it, what would you have done? Would you have stayed and kept paying the toll for love that never arrived? Or would you have walked away, like I did, finally free, finally silent, finally alive?